I am looking forward to sharing our next steps in full in the spring. But one animal welfare issue included in that consultation is the racing of dogs, notably greyhounds. This is something the government has been asked to consider for quite some time. I'm pleased to share with the Senedd today that I have seen the strength of feeling on this, and I have listened. The matter has been discussed and debated in the Senedd, and as demonstrated only last week, has clear cross-party support. Our consultation on a national model for animal welfare, which included questions relating to greyhounds, received over 1,100 responses. In that consultation, the question asking for evidence and views on a phased ban found almost 2/3 of respondents were in favour of such a ban. A petition to ban greyhound racing in Wales received over 35,000 signatures. And this sits alongside campaign work by the Cut the Chase Coalition, which includes Blue Cross, Dogs Trust, Greyhound Rescue Wales, Hope Rescue and the RSPCA. And we also note what is happening in other countries across the world who are taking steps to ban this activity. As a result, Llyr, I believe that now is the right time to move to ban greyhound racing in Wales. And we are proud to be the first nation in the UK to do this. I want a ban to come into force as soon as is practically possible. There will be more work to do in ensuring the dogs and their owners and those involved in the industry around the racetrack can wind down from this activity while still protecting the welfare of dogs currently within the industry and the local community and the local economy. And that is why our next step will be to set up an implementation group. The group will engage with stakeholders, learn from other countries' approaches, such as New Zealand, where the government are bringing forward a bill to end greyhound racing, and advise this government on how a ban will come into force, the legislative approach, and when it will be delivered. Now, a range of members from right across this chamber have brought forward their views regarding greyhound racing. This cross-party support has been considered, and I'm grateful for their advice on this matter. I have taken this and the views of the public and the campaign groups and the responses to the recent consultation into account in coming to this decision.
As I said at the start of my statement, I want Wales to be an exemplar for the highest standards of animal health and welfare through working together with industry, our stakeholders and individual animal owners. We will continue to deliver on this goal. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you for your statement, Cabinet Secretary. I have to say, and I won't normally say these sort of things in chamber, I was very disappointed that we only got to see this statement about 10 minutes ago, which is a poor form, I think. But I'm sure there must be a reason why that was. However, much of it was in this statement we clearly agree with. The desire for exemplary standards of animal health and welfare are something we must always strive for, and I know you're passionate about as I am, and we will continue to do that. And I agree with the priority of keeping diseases out of Wales. That is so fundamental at the moment with the fear of foot and mouth, avian flu on our borders, blue tongue. Okay, blue tongue's quiet at the moment because the tick are down at the moment, but when it comes back, it's a real fear for us all. And of course, TB is a massive issue for all of us, and the working in partnership across borders as well as what we're doing with farmers like in the Pembrokeshire project are really important to shape an outcome which can stop this terrible disease that is ending up requiring us to kill over 10,000 cows and cattle a year. So we need to learn from that and hope we find a way forward, and hope the various technical advisory group and the programme board advise you well in doing that. Animal licensing arrangements are really important. And one area which you may be of interest, which I was going to raise at another point in the chamber, but it's impertinent today, is I was at Coleg Gwent recently, and I was looking at their small animals department, which ranges from tarantulas to large snakes to lots of different animals where students learn about. But there is no licensing requirement for them at all. And they were very concerned because they thought there should be, because there is something similar in England. Yet small collections of animals, or private collections, have no regulation on them unless they're charging and people can see them, and then they become sort of like a zoo status or something. But there's clearly a gap there we need to fill around animal licensing of those collections of animals. The budget highlights for border control around £4 million of revenue this year. I know there's a fair considerable lump sum of capital. I'm not sure how that will be deployed on border security, but it is going to be fundamental more than anything. And I hear about the animal and welfare framework and the importance that means, but currently there's £1.9 million in the budget to support that. And so I suppose, Cabinet Secretary, I really want to understand from this side of your statement, is there enough money for our borders, for our welfare framework, to make sure that we can keep our borders safe? There are people in the farming community who have grave concerns that we might not have the capacity, the resilience to maintain our vigilance to keep these diseases from out of our country because of the devastating effect they can have. I've also met with the RSPCA, and I was pleased to meet with the Cut the Chase Coalition and met some of the dogs recently outside. And I understand the challenges and the concerns and the overwhelming evidence that they have shown. And our group, as you know, has got cross-party support, but there is a free position on this. People have different views as well. And I'm certainly going to go and visit the racetrack, because I haven't, in fairness, to take a balanced perspective, I will be visiting them as well. But I think the evidence is very, very powerful. And I recognise all of the good work that is going on around dog breeding and putting all of our animals at the forefront of our decision-making to make sure that we do the very best by them, because if we don't, who will? Cabinet Secretary, I suppose my biggest questions to you are, have we got enough resilience to make sure that our agricultural system here in Wales will remain out of threat? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just first begin by apologising for any delay. Sometimes it happens, there's unavoidable things behind the scenes. We always try, as you know, to get good, as much notice as we can. It just so happened today, one way or the other, it was slightly delayed, but my apologies. But thank you for the points. Some really important points within that. One is that matter of working across borders on issues like blue tongue, foot and mouth, avian influenza, not only with the CVOs and working with APFA across the UK, but also working with colleagues internationally. So we keep these diseases out as much as we can, or where they have gained a foot in, we strive to keep them out of Wales as much as we can, and that is partly to do with biosecurity measures in some of these areas as well, safe sourcing of stock and cattle in some respects, so we all have a responsibility collectively. But it brings me directly to the point you made about, as well, about how this ties into borders as well, because we have to make sure, the lesson of the past is, we have to make sure that our borders are safe as well. And we do have a different situation in the post-EU landscape and the EU withdrawal and the Windsor framework now in place and so on. But even having said that, we need to make sure that all our entry points around the UK all have good controls on, because that is how we keep diseases out, both in terms of biosecurity, but also phytosanitary issues as well. So we'll work with the UK government on that. We work with APFA on that. The Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Welsh Language firmly knows that I'm regularly in with him, stressing the importance of keeping the necessary quantum of funding into this space. Actually, it's the space that you never notice until something goes wrong. So we will keep that, and the other person who keeps me live to this, of course, is my Chief Veterinary Officer as well, who will regularly tell that. Can I just also note, you mentioned about colleague Gwent and others. I mentioned in my opening remarks, I'm looking forward to bringing forward the fuller response to the consultation we did on the licensing regime. I've been able and pleased to make the announcement today in terms of greyhound racing and the way forward, but on the wider piece I'll bring that forward. And of course we will look at what responses we had then to smaller facilities that deal with animals as well as the larger ones. That is a very pertinent point. And just finally, just to welcome what I think was his support for the compelling cross-party case and the campaigns and the growing evidence internationally that has led other countries now to move to a ban on greyhound racing. And I thank you for that.
Griffiths.
Can I welcome your statement today, Cabinet Secretary, particularly in relation to a ban on greyhound racing? It's something I know that members on these benches and others across the chamber have raised consistently with you, and of course we will do what we need to do in terms of working with you to make sure that what is introduced is fit for purpose and achieves the goal and the aim that you stated this afternoon. But of course you did say that you wanted it to happen as soon as possible, and therein lies the small print, I suppose, doesn't it? Because government does need to show diligence and an adherence to proper process, otherwise you leave yourself open to challenge from those who might oppose such a move. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit as to whether you believe it's necessary to introduce primary legislation. I'm mindful of, the timetable challenges in terms of legislating here now in the last 14 months that we have before dissolution, or whether you believe that other legal or regulatory routes are possible. Doing something in a rush is always a risk, isn't it? And I know you're aware of this. Yes, we do need to act swiftly, but we do need to act properly here as well. Now, you reference in your statement, we do need time to consider the consequences of a ban and unforeseen consequences. We need to prevent, for example, unregulated racing or driving, the whole sector underground. You touched on the welfare of existing greyhounds being protected as the industry potentially winds down in Wales. Now, much of that consideration has to happen concurrently with the development of any potential legislation. So are you confident that, the 14 months that we have is sufficient to do that, if indeed it is your intention to make sure that this happens in this Senedd? I'm sure you could confirm that much for us. So just on wider issues then that you reference, I'm just wondering how all of this sits together in the wider landscape of government animal welfare policy, because we've had a statement on animal health and welfare without a single reference to the Wales Animal Health and Welfare Framework Group, which I believe, plays much of that role. The Wales Animal Health and Welfare Framework we had up to 2024. We have the Animal Welfare Plan for Wales up to 2026. You referenced the national model for the regulation of animal welfare. How or where does all of that come together in a coherent approach? Maybe you could just enlighten us somewhat. I agree with much of what's been said about the risk of livestock disease outbreaks and the need to be vigilant. Maybe that could be a separate statement, either oral or written, because foot and mouth, blue tongue, particularly with the spring ahead, and avian influenza as well, are ones I know that are causing great concern for the sector, and we need that reassurance rather than just fleeting references in this statement today. And finally from me, livestock attacks. Of course, I welcome the fact that you're hoping to use or work with those proposing private members' bills in the UK government. But of course, as we know, private members' bills don't always end up achieving what they'd intended to achieve when they started out. So would you be willing to demand the relevant powers for Wales if we find once again, because this isn't the first time this has been tried at Westminster, that aim of finally getting to grips in a meaningful way with attacks on livestock isn't something that's achieved in Westminster? Diolch.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you as well for the support of the decision that we've made now as Welsh Government to move forward with a ban on greyhound racing. And acknowledging the work of you and others around the Chamber, I have to say, who've spoken in so many debates, who've responded to constituents, who've engaged with stakeholders out there in order to come to the conclusions you have as well. The implementation group is going to be key to this, because some of the factors that you mentioned, and they are genuine factors, so things like the risk of driving underground, either greyhound racing or alternatively racing with other dogs, not greyhounds, and so on, because that has been known as well. So dealing with that, and I think, so in that, engaging with some of the animal welfare charities to understand the practicalities of this, the best way forward, I think is going to be important. So that implementation group is going to be key. And I think they're also going to be key as well in setting out for us the best way forward, because there are different ways forward. Avoiding the negative externalities, the unintended consequences we want to avoid, jeopardising welfare in one way or the other, but pointing to me, right, here's the way you can do it. And there are different ways. There are statutory instrument ways, there is primary legislation ways, there are ways in which this can be done. There are also ways that I think that can encourage engagement with the process, so that everybody feels that they actually have their two penneth within it, whilst recognising what we're on is to, as soon as possible, deliver a ban on greyhound racing. So it's the implementation group is going to be key on this, and I look forward to coming back after the recess to actually scope out a little bit more about the timescale of the group. But when I say as soon as possible, I apply the same sort of form of words to the work of the group as well. I wanted to come forward in a timely manner with suggestions of the way forward. You mentioned how does this all hang together. It all hangs together, of course, within the Animal Welfare Plan for Wales. So all of these elements, I mean, the challenge is we are doing so much in so many areas in animal welfare in Wales, but it hangs together within that Animal Welfare Plan. But of course, coming forward shortly will be our response to the licensing consultation, which will be important as well, because that one has the potential to impact positively on thousands upon thousands upon thousands of animals right across Wales of all different types and sizes and species. On the matters of blue tongue and other diseases, just to give you the reassurance that this is far from the only opportunity that I'll be here debating this with you and others, and we also engage regularly, both with the CVO and with vets out in the field, but also, and with APFA, but also with the farming unions as well. In fact, we meet, on a regular basis with NFU, FUW, and other organisations. Even this week, I was in an hour's meeting with them, and animal diseases was on the agenda. And finally, on the Westminster legislation, look, we are hopeful, because one of these bills, of course, fell a couple of times previously. We are really hopeful because it's been picked up and it's high in the rankings here. And there is a real desire from DEFRA to see these supported. We are hopeful that these will come through, really hopeful, and we're keen to work with them. We've said that orally to them in meetings, we've put it in writing to them. So I'm really hopeful that they will now be delivered, because dealing with those issues of attacks on livestock and wider welfare issues, if we can do this because there's a private member's bill going forward, let's do it. Let's grab the opportunity.
Carolyn Thomas.
Thank you. Following the debate in the Chamber last week and the petition submitted by Vanessa from Hope Rescue, I'd like to say that there are well over 35,000 people who are pleased and relieved to hear this statement today, banning greyhound rescue in Wales. I'd like to welcome the cross-party work we've been doing. And as chair of the Animal Welfare Cross-Party Group, I'd like to thank the Welsh Government and all the officials for all that they do on animal welfare in Wales. I feel we're really leading the way here. And I'd also like to thank Animal Licensing Wales and most of all the dedication to all the organisations and experts, I must say, of Cut the Chase Coalition, who have spoken so much. And I'd like to also pay tribute to Almost Home Dog Rescue in Chris and Joe. Thank you very much to all those that have spoken and taken part in this. This is a good day for thousands of animals in Wales, and I'm so excited and so pleased to hear this. My question to you, Cabinet Secretary, is time is of an essence, because the longer it goes on, the more it if you could let us know of a timeline as soon as possible, working with organisations which will help them as well, because I know they are ready. They are busy, they are full, but they are ready to work with you to make sure that greyhounds are given a good home going forward. Thank you very much.
Carolyn, thank you very much indeed. And I just want to recognise the work that you've done as the chair of the Animal Welfare Cross-Party Group on this and many other issues, and the membership of that group as well, because it's one of those areas that does, not just on greyhounds, but generally has real cross-party support. Thank you for your support for the statement today, and particularly the announcement on our intention now to move forward with the ban on greyhound racing, and to do it as soon as possible. I keep repeating that. But actually, the work really starts now, and that's why the implementation group needs to get on with the work, and that's the first thing that I'll bring back to the Chamber. We'll be scoping out a sort of timeline for the work of that, and we don't want it to be long. We don't want this to disappear across the horizon. We need them to look at it very rapidly but thoroughly, the points that were made by Llyr a moment ago. Really pull this to bits then and say, right, what is the best way forward that we can advise to get to that ban as soon as possible? So I look forward to bringing that forward rapidly. We'll be working on that over the recess and bringing that forward. And then, based on their deliberations, we can then set out the timetable then for moving to a ban. When I say the work starts now, it's important to say that we want to engage with all the stakeholders out there. We really do. And that includes things like, well, what is the future for that track then going forward to avoid it being left, abandoned and left derelict and so on? What is the future for that, etc., etc. There'll be lots of those things to look at as well. But I think, yes, in fairly short order, I'll be able to set out the timetable for the group and then also to set out the timetable based on their deliberations as to how we can deliver the ban.
Jane Dodds.
And thank you so much, Cabinet Secretary. I'll declare an interest. I am the owner of a rescue greyhound called Wanda. And I have to say, there are not many times where I stand up in the chamber and I'm smiling, but this is one of those days. It is, as Carolyn has said, an absolutely fantastic day. This is a landmark statement which we must celebrate. It really does very clearly demonstrate the commitment that Wales has to looking after our animals. I want to pay tribute to the Cut the Chase Coalition and others, many of whom are in the gallery with us today. Thank you to you all. Diolch yn fawr iawn. It is you who has brought this to the point it is. And I couldn't do what you do, but we all want to thank you for your dedication. And I know you'll continue in your work to make sure that all animals are safe. And right now, I know you'll be celebrating in your hearts, in your heads, and maybe you'll be having a further celebration later on. But thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn. I also want to pay tribute to all those greyhounds who've gone before and all those greyhounds who will come after as well. You'll know that I started to talk about this as a result of owning Arthur, a traumatised greyhound who was 8 years old when he came to us. I learnt a lot from him. He could sleep at 100 miles an hour, but he was absolutely devastated by his experiences on the track. And we lost him 3 years later, far, far too early. But I dedicate this time to Arthur. Many of you, and I know those of you in the gallery and many of us have seen the trauma and the injuries to these dogs. Their suffering has been needless, their abuse has been unnecessary, and their pain has been avoidable. But from today, we need to mark this in the sand and to make sure that this stops. It really is important that we remember these dogs are wonderful, placid, calm, amazing animals. And I'm proud to be an owner. And I say to all of you, as we look forward, it might be that you will be asked to give a home to a greyhound rescue. My question to you is, we have a track that is still active now. So I just really wondered if you could tell us what your aims are in terms of ensuring that the dogs on that track are safe going forward and that we protect them, keep them in Wales, and if necessary, work with those animal charities to ensure that they do have a forever home. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you very much indeed. And We've heard a lot about Arthur previously, before he passed away, and Wanda now as well. And look, I join you in recognition of all those campaigners, individuals and organisations who've lent their weight to this over such a long time as well. And in fact, if you look at other countries who've been through this, it's often been the external campaigners that have led to the change in mood amongst legislators that have led to the point where a government stands up and says, OK, we get it. We need to move forward. But I made the point earlier that the work actually starts now, and for some of those campaigning organisations who have a great deal of knowledge in whether it's in rehoming, fostering, etc., we're going to need to draw on some of that expertise now, because one of those things we need to be ready for and prepare for, and the implementation group I would want to look at is how do we deal with those greyhounds who will now be looking for rehoming. And that clearly relates to the later point that he made about the track. The ban isn't in place until the ban is in place, in which case the track is still hosting racing events, greyhounds are still racing there. Now, on that basis, we need to ensure that we continue to work with the track, that the monitoring is done, that the veterinary inspections are going on, that the welfare of the greyhounds who are currently racing is still monitored and looked after and so on, and that those greyhounds that are coming forward are still found good homes as well afterwards, including when they're injured or worse as well. So we need to recognise that this isn't going to happen tomorrow, but we need to work towards this ban now as soon as possible, and that's why I think the work of the implementation group to scope this out, and we need to draw on all the expertise that's out there, all the stakeholders that are out there, and say, well, right, how do we move without unintended consequences as rapidly as possible to that ban, so that Wales does actually lead the way now in this. But thank you very much, and thanks for the work that you've done on this as well.
John Griffiths.
Huw Irranca-Davies. Minister, one thing that becomes very apparent very quickly when you're a frontline political representative is how strongly the public feel about animal welfare, rightly so. And that's become very apparent, I think, with greyhound racing as well. And I've certainly had a lot of correspondence from concerned constituents, and we know the harm that's caused. Cut the Chase has done such a good job. They were here the other week on the Senedd steps with the 300 collars representing greyhounds who were killed at licensed tracks in England and Wales in 1 year, and they've provided us with information that 115 greyhounds were unfortunately killed on the Welsh track in 1 year. So the harm is very clear indeed. And when you're out walking in the park, you so often bump into people walking greyhounds, and you get into a conversation and they explain that they're rescue dogs. And when you hear about the backgrounds, it's so disturbing and worrying. So with that background, I'm very pleased that you've made this announcement today and also set out the process. But given that this Senedd and this government has 14 months to run, I wonder if you could tell us whether you are confident that a ban will be in place before that 14 months expires, because obviously the Welsh Government can only control these issues in Wales over that period of time. It's absolutely vital that we get this ban in place as quickly as possible to prevent any further suffering.
John, I agree with you. The ban needs to be in place as soon as possible. Now that we've made the announcement, we need to work collectively, all people who have a stake in this, to make sure we can bring forward this ban as soon as possible. I want the implementation group to bring forward the way that we can do that. And there are ways to do that. I mentioned earlier on, primary legislation is a way forward, statutory instruments, etc. But the important thing in all of this is also stakeholder engagement right across the piece. All the welfare, the economic, the future life of the track issues, all of those need to be bottomed out. We also need to work with some of those with experience in the animal welfare charity sectors to make sure that even today as we stand here, that we don't have negative impacts happening straight away. So, for example, if people were to start now or soon sending their dogs across the border to race or whatever, etc. So let me be crystal clear. The animal welfare legislation in Wales stays in place, the licence and the track stays in place, all of that keeps on going. But we just need to get to that point where we can do this ban now as soon as practically possible.
Joyce Watson.
Diolch, Dipro Llawer. And today is a good day for greyhounds in Wales. We can mark it down and hopefully make greyhound racing in Wales part of history. That was then and this is now. I certainly welcome your statement, and I look forward to hearing more about the implementation group, the timescale for their work, how quickly that's going to come back here so that a decision can be made, because many people have said it's 14 months. It's not 14 months, actually, if you take in the time that we will close down operations before the election. It's more like 12 months. But we have met many greyhounds, ex-racing dogs, and they are loving animals. They come up to people, they still trust people, which is pretty incredible. They love leaning on people, which is quite wonderful. But the point is that we have in Wales demonstrated over many years the ability to bring in groundbreaking legislation to safeguard animals. And I'm proud to stand here today along with colleagues and with people upstairs who have driven this forward. And without all of those groups that they've been paid tribute here today, giving us all that information, feeding it to us, we wouldn't be able to make that decision here today in the informed way that we
You need to ask the question now, please, Joyce.
So my question has already been asked. That is to update us on the work of the implementation board and also how you intend to bring this legislation forward and what form that might take.
Thank you, Joyce. And again, I recognise the work of you and others in supporting the change that there's been here over years in this respect, but also broadly. This assembly, as it then was, now Senedd, has always pioneered in this area of animal welfare, and proudly so. And I think we can do it again here as well. And just to give you that assurance again, yes, I'll bring forward in short order the timescale for the work of the implementation group and what it'll be doing, who will be engaged in it. I'll work on that over recess and bring it forward. And then they can bring forward for me then the way that we get as soon as possible to that ban on greyhound racing in Wales.
Huw Irranca-Davies.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I don't demur for any of the comments that have been raised here today, Minister, but what's really important is enforcement, because there will be illicit greyhound racing going on once you shut the licence tract. And I've seen it time and time again where legislation and fine words are spoken in this chamber, yet the practical implementation and delivery on the ground is just not happening. And we see it with hare coursing in particular in the Vale of Glamorgan, which is a massive issue, and the police are unable, either through lack of resources or lack of current powers, to face down the hare coursers. So I would ask, in your preparation, your officials and yourself give due consideration to implementation of measures to make sure that illicit greyhound racing does not take hold, and that the authorities are consulted who will be charged with implementing this ban, so that they have the suite of powers to stop, I'll use the word black market, opening up in illicit racing and gambling that will drive this to a violent underworld and deep mistrust of what actually the legislation will ultimately achieve.
It's a really pertinent point, and that's why I think the work of the implementation group in frankly and honestly looking at the issues surrounding this and how to avoid negative consequences that are foreseeable. The hare coursing is an interesting one because, of course, the massive amount of work that has gone into tackling hare coursing way back previously when it was out in Fens and Lincolnshire and so on, and places like that, meant that they looked for other places that they could go, and they headed into Wales. We've got an enormous amount of work going on at the moment in North Wales on this particular issue. But yes, there's an issue in the Vale as well. Not just in the Vale, by the way, but also in the hills, the big, broad, sweeping common lands above Ogmore as well. Sorry, not Ogmore by sea, Ogmore constituency of Ogmore, up in the hills of Mid Glamorgan and West Glamorgan. But I think this aspect of the displacement of activity into unregulated, illegal, criminal activity, that is something I would also want to look that the animal welfare charities, the police and others need to look at as part of this piece of work, so that we take this forward in a very considered, very careful, well-judged manner to get to that ban as soon as practically possible, but considering all of those elements within it. So I suspect there'll be other days when we come back to the Chamber and we start to unwrap this in some detail when the implementation group brings forward its ideas. But that is a relevant point that we need to guard against. And then it's also the issue of then, if that were to, if there were any danger of that happening, it is the enforcement and the engagement with the authorities on that to prevent it happening in the very first instance, I have to say.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Item 5 this afternoon is a statement by the Deputy First Minister and Cabinet Secretary